It's 5:05 and welcome into a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, it was a busy night in Raleigh last night as Democrat Governor Josh Stein addressed a joint session of the North Carolina General Assembly, providing his first ever State of the State address. Governor Stein, of course, successful in his election victory back in November of last year. A split political makeup between the governor and the General Assembly. Republicans hold a majority in both the House and the Senate. A supermajority in the Senate, one vote shy of the supermajority in the House. And thus far, things have been relatively cordial in regards to the relationship between the governor and the Republican-led GA. Well, right off the bat, the governor started with a focus on Hurricane Helene in just his first couple seconds of addressing that joint session and the residents across the state last night. Here's Governor Stein.
But first, I must report on the state of our state. I was sworn in as governor 10 weeks ago today. Assuming this office's responsibility has led to prayer and reflection. When any of us faces an important challenge, we search for strength. Strength to rise to the occasion. Strength to reach across differences in search of common ground. Strength to stand up for what we know is right. Strength to meet the moment. Sometimes you don't know how strong you are until you are put to the test. Hurricane Helene and its horrific aftermath tested our state and our people in unprecedented ways. The storm flooded western North Carolina, stealing too many lives from us and devastating too many communities. But in the days, weeks, and months that followed, we have all seen that the state of our state is strong. North Carolina strong.
So obviously they're talking about the impacts that Helene has had on the state, and with all of that said, still reporting that the state of the state is strong just a couple of months into his administration. Obviously, with hurricane relief, that brings in politics as lawmakers who are duly elected from one political party or another continue to hash out the details about spending relief and the process to get Western North Carolina recovered. The governor commented that we need to keep politics out of hurricane relief.
By the way, the people who have been aiding folks out west do not care a whit about the politics of the people they are helping. They simply want to help their neighbors in need, just like the Good Samaritan who took mercy on the traveler left beaten and bloody on the side of the road to Jericho. We must follow their example and step up for our neighbors in Western North Carolina. My team and I have been focused on doing whatever we can to help. On the first day in office, I took action to cut red tape and make it easier for folks to recover. The crews and contractors of the Department of Transportation have reopened more than 1,300 roads so far, and as of March 1st, I-40 is open. We've removed nearly 5 million cubic yards of debris from our roadways. Half of all state parks and cultural sites hit by the storm have fully reopened, and almost all of them are accepting visitors today. So many people and organizations, public and private, have worked so incredibly hard.
And obviously still a lot of work to continue to be done. One of the big emphases from Governor Stein last night was small business, as he claimed it was the backbone of our state's economy and said more needs to be done to help these small businesses as they continue to recover from the unimaginable devastation left from Hurricane Helene in September of last year.
We've been focused on supporting struggling small businesses. After a major disaster, more than 40% of all affected small businesses never open their doors. Within 2 years, 60% have permanently closed shop. Folks, we cannot let that be our story here in North Carolina. Small business is the beating heart of the economy of Western North Carolina. So we have partnered with the Dogwood Health Trust and the Duke Endowment to offer $35 million in grants to impacted small businesses. They can use these grants for paying their staff, restoring inventory, fixing up their property, whatever they need. So far, we've been able to award more than 1,000 grants to small businesses.
That's Governor Josh Stein talking about the small business impacts, some pretty alarming stats about how businesses are unfortunately so heavily affected from natural disasters like Hurricane Helene, and those stats of 60% of them not reopening after 2 years, very concerning for the western half of North Carolina. And even with all of the work that has been done over the following couple of the previous couple of months, there is still a lot of work to do, and well, that work costs a lot of money. Stein talked about his current conversations with not only North Carolina lawmakers, but with the Trump administration and Congress to flood more relief into Western North Carolina.
Folks, we're talking about $60 billion in overall damages, by far the costliest storm to ever hit our state. That is too much for those affected to bear themselves. They need our help. People need to get back in their homes. Roads and bridges need to be fixed. Businesses need to keep their doors open and their employees hired. Our communities need clean drinking water. That's why I'm working with President Trump and his cabinet and our congressional delegation to seek billions more in federal funds ASAP. And that's why I urge you to pass the $500 million Western North Carolina recovery bill. We need that money now. Heck, we needed it yesterday.
That was really the first plea from the governor throughout his State of the State address to North Carolina lawmakers, encouraging them to speed up the process to allocate an additional $500 million in relief. As of this morning, the General Assembly has already allocated more than $1 billion in hurricane relief. Most of that has been earmarked and is set to be spent, and the governor wants more, and North Carolina lawmakers continue that process in Raleigh as of this morning. And while the major emphasis of his opening comments were, of course, on the devastation in western North Carolina, surprisingly, Governor Stein mentioned folks in eastern North Carolina that continue to deal with the failures of government as it regards to NCOR, the North Carolina Office of Resiliency and Recovery, with Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. Take a listen.
When we're talking about rebuilding, we don't mean only out west. A number of folks down east still need help. Folks who lost everything to Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. Folks who just want their home back. The bill that we're waiting on also includes funding to help them move forward as well. And no matter where you live, if disaster strikes, we will be there for you here in North Carolina.
Of course, commenting on the failures of his predecessor, Governor Roy Cooper, and NCOR, as folks have waited in some cases close to a decade to get their homes either rebuilt or repaired. More than 1,000 families still struggling with NCOR, part of the $500+ million in relief that Stein has brought up and is asking for, and the General Assembly is discussing surrounds of providing one final influx of cash to NCOR, the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency, for them to get the job done in eastern North Carolina. We'll continue to track those details over on our website, carolinajournal.com, and right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Coming up, we'll continue our discussion and audio and video from Governor Josh Stein's address to the House and Senate in Raleigh last night, his State of the State address. He'll jump into the economy, community college, as well as cutting taxes. Those details coming up here in just a few minutes. It's now 5:14 on the Carolina Journal News Hour, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. It is time to get a look at your roadways on a Thursday morning, a traffic update with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you.
It's 22 minutes past the hour. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. A busy night in Raleigh as Governor Josh Stein addressed not only a joint session of the North Carolina House and Senate, but residents across the state as he gave his first State of the State address as the new governor of North Carolina. He spent a good chunk of his first part of the speech talking about Hurricane Helene, talking about recovery efforts. He then transitioned into moving forward as a state and talked about how every resident of the state, regardless of where they live, should have a shot at success.
Fundamentally, our commitment to our people is that they have a real shot at success, to get a good paying job or start a small business. That's the promise of North Carolina. Where you come from should never limit how far you can go. Delivering on that promise is what drives me as your governor. In recent years, we've recruited businesses that have created thousands, tens of thousands of jobs in this state. We've been ranked in the top 2 businesses for business 4 years running. We've become a leader in the clean energy economy. There is a lot to be proud of and plenty of credit to go around. And I am committed to doing my part as governor to continue our state's economic success. In just the past 2 months, we've announced more than 1,500 new jobs, most of which are in rural North Carolina. But we cannot rest on our laurels. Other states want what we have. It is a very competitive world. We can't afford to leave anyone's talents on the sidelines. So we must be a state that is welcoming to all people. We must continue to grow our economy and ensure that it works for everyone. The people of North Carolina are our greatest asset. So to invest in our future, we must invest in our people.
In regards to investing in our people, the governor announced a program for free community college for all residents of North Carolina, those that are looking to go into various high-skilled labor positions. Here's the governor last night.
Our goal is to set the national pace in growing the number of skilled workers, including doubling the number of apprentices over the next 4 years and empowering hundreds of thousands of North Carolinians to get the credentials that they need to secure a good-paying job. So I'm proposing that for students getting certified in high-demand sectors like advanced manufacturing or healthcare or IT, that we provide them free community college.
Free community college for those folks looking to go into those various fields, as North Carolina has been ranked multiple times over the last couple of years as the #1 state for business, meaning that those businesses are looking for an educated workforce to complete those jobs. The governor then transitioned into some of the issues that the state is facing, and one of them, from the mountains to the coast, is a struggle in regards to housing supply.
North Carolina is the 3rd fastest growing state in this country after Texas and Florida. But our housing supply has not kept up. To keep prices down, we need more housing of all types: single family, duplexes, triplexes, apartments, condominiums, special needs housing. We can find bipartisan solutions to high housing costs if we work together. So let's do it, and let's get more homes for our people.
And one of the solutions that has been brought forward by the North Carolina, what I'll note, Republican-controlled General Assembly, is cutting red tape and getting government out of the way in regards to permitting and the process for developers to build, as the governor noted, whether it be single-family homes, apartments, or condominiums. Those are some of the things that the General Assembly is currently working in regards to cutting red tape. Speaking of cutting, the governor talked about cutting taxes for middle-class North Carolinians.
To make North Carolina a state where people thrive, we need to invest in children and their families by cutting taxes for middle-class families. We can cut taxes. We can cut taxes to help families manage the cost of raising a child. We can cut taxes to make child care more affordable. We can cut taxes on working families to put more money in their pockets, lift children out of poverty, and stimulate local economies. These three targeted tax cuts are what being pro-family looks like.
A very interesting way to wrap that up from Governor Stein, being pro-family. Of course, that is something that you do tend to hear from more conservative Republican lawmakers and policymakers, whether that be here in North Carolina or in Washington, D.C. And to do all of that, to cut those taxes, the governor talked about the current status of the state economy and some issues that he sees with the budget going forward.
But we won't be able to make these necessary investments if we do not address the self-inflicted fiscal cliff that we face in a couple years, especially given today's economic uncertainties. We're at a fork in the road when it comes to our budget. We can go ahead with the nearly $10 billion in tax giveaways over the next 4 years, mainly to the wealthy and to corporate shareholders. And by the way, very few of those shareholders are North Carolinians. Heck, most of them aren't even American. Or we can help our neighbors recover from Hurricane Helene, invest in our public safety and public schools, provide targeted tax cuts to support our working families, and keep up with the needs of our fast-growing population. So what is it going to be? Are we going to give money to out-of-state shareholders or invest in North Carolina families? We cannot afford to do both. We should choose North Carolina's children and family every time.
Following a similar thread that is typically parroted from Democrat individuals when we're talking about tax cuts and not cutting taxes for the wealthy and cutting taxes for the middle class. That was Josh Stein in Raleigh last night. He also announced a similar effort that what's going on in Washington, D.C. You're very familiar with the Department of Government Efficiency. Well, Josh Stein wants to see something similar in North Carolina, and he's instructed groups under his administration to do just that.
Of course, we have to be fiscally prudent, to be smart about how we invest our taxpayers' dollars. That's why I'm directing my budget office to set up the Impact Center to ensure that our government is run effectively and efficiently, because people should know that their taxpayer dollars are being well spent. But let's get it right. Let's use a scalpel, not a chainsaw.
A little tongue-in-cheek there from Governor Stein in regards to Elon Musk's comments about using a chainsaw instead of a scalpel to cut government waste, fraud, and abuse. Governor Stein says he wants to do it the other way around. Start small with those cuts and then work into larger cuts there. Some interesting comments there from Governor Josh Stein. We'll transition into a public education. While the event was, for the most part, pretty bipartisan, there were a couple of shots taken at Republican lawmakers. We'll have those details coming up for you here in just a few minutes on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:30. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at the roads on your Thursday morning. A traffic update. What is this? Grandpa Von Cannon? Congratulations, Boomer.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Dick.
It's 5:36. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. We are providing a full recap and recovery last night of Democrat Governor Josh Stein's first State of the State address as he addressed a joint session of the North Carolina General Assembly last night, commenting on issues like hurricane relief, providing a shot for success for all residents of North Carolina, regardless of where they grow up and where their education level is, and talking about some other issues like housing and taxes that affect everyday North Carolinians day in and day out. After that, the governor then transitioned into talking about education. We know this has been a major political battle across the state for quite some time now, and the governor opened it up with talking about teacher pay.
A good teacher inspires their students. That's why we must recruit and retain the best. And that's why we must give teachers a real pay raise. Right now, North Carolina's starting teacher pay is the second lowest in the Southeast. Second lowest. Lower than every one of our bordering states, even South Carolina. Here's a goal that I think we can all get behind. Let's make starting teacher salaries in North Carolina the highest in the Southeast.
A big cheer there from Democrat lawmakers, not necessarily with any plan to pay for increasing teacher pay to the level of which the Governor Stein and Democrats in the General Assembly would like to see. And with that, well, one of the ways that the governor seems to think to pay for it is taking a shot at the North Carolina Opportunity Scholarship Program, or voucher program, that has been introduced by the North Carolina General Assembly. This, one of the most politically heated moments of the evening last night.
North Carolina is 48th in the nation in per pupil investment. Let that sink in. 48th. We should not be taking money from our public school kids to pay wealthy parents sending their kids to unaccountable private schools to the tune of $7.5 billion over the next decade.
Of course, talking about school choice, an incredibly popular program here in the state over the last couple of years since it was introduced by the Republican-led General Assembly. His predecessor and Governor Roy Cooper, also not a fan of the Opportunity Scholarship Program, and it would appear that Governor Josh Stein very much following in his footsteps in regards to his criticisms of the program about not using taxpayer dollars to fund what he claims giving vouchers to just the wealthy, even though the program does not necessarily work in that way as described by Governor Stein. Well, school infrastructure does continue to be a major topic across the state, as well as local school boards and local county commissioners struggle in major repair bills for dilapidated school buildings. And, well, Governor Stein has a proposal to deal with that as well. And it would be you and I, the voters of North Carolina, actually deciding on how that works.
Our students also need safe and well-built schools. Unfortunately, too many of our schools are overcrowded, or use trailers, or have old leaking roofs and broken heating and air conditioning. It is 2025. We should not have to send kids home from school because the heat doesn't work. We need safer, healthier, and more modern schools. So tonight, I'm proposing a $4 billion public school bond. And if you're not sure about it, let's let the voters decide.
Letting the voters decide about that $4 billion school bond, that will be an interesting process to follow over the next couple of months if Republican lawmakers who do have the majority in Raleigh do want to move forward with putting that bond on or that referendum on a ballot for all North Carolina voters, something that has not been done in well over 20 years across the Tar Heel state. Keeping the conversation with the schooling and education, Governor Stein briefly talked about school safety and the importance there.
We also need upgrades for safety, like cameras, fences around playgrounds, exterior locks, fewer access points to secure our school buildings from people who mean harm. Nothing is more important than keeping our kids safe.
Not much of a partisan issue there in regards to school safety, talking about some of the advancements in technology to provide to local educators and to principals and superintendents within school districts to keep students safe. Something that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks is some legislation working its way through the General Assembly as it relates to banning cell phones within public schools. Governor Stein, well, he's all in favor of it.
Cell phones are a major source of distraction for our students and disruption for our teachers. When teachers don't have to compete with TikTok for student attention, and when students don't have to choose between social studies and social media, real learning happens, and their mental health improves. Too many young people are struggling. Too many kids are bullied. They need and they deserve a 7-hour break from the unrelenting pressures of phones and social media. Classrooms should be cell phone-free zones.
Giving the indication there that if this legislation, which has been working through the North Carolina House and Senate, that would instruct local school districts to come up with a policy, it's not regulated necessarily, there's no exact pathway, but telling local school districts to come up with a policy to deal with cell phones, if that is to move forward out of the General Assembly, it would appear that Governor Josh Stein would be very much in favor of signing that into law. Well, Governor Stein, as he has only been the governor now just a couple of months, he spoke about his time as the Attorney General for North Carolina as he talked about keeping individuals and residents across the state safe.
I spent my last 8 years, as you know, as Attorney General, working to keep the people of the state safe. And as governor, I am still at it. So I'm standing up for the people who protect our communities. We ask law enforcement officers to make tremendous sacrifices on our behalf. We ask them to run towards danger when the rest of us may flee. Time and time again, they say yes to protect and to serve.
And in regards to those that protect and serve, Governor Stein says that state law enforcement officers, whether that be individuals of the State Highway Patrol, part of the North Carolina Department of Corrections, they need a pay increase.
As I travel the state, I regularly hear about law enforcement staffing shortages. Vacancies make it harder for law enforcement to do their jobs to keep us safe. That's why I am proposing salary increases for state law enforcement and correctional officers, and signing bonuses for new officers, whether they are state or local. Let's make sure that we have more police officers on the beat. Let's show the nation that we put our money where our mouths are. In North Carolina, we value our law enforcement, that we invest in them the way that they invest in us.
Another breaking in the trends in regards to some of the national conversation from individuals within Governor Stein's political party, not only talking about his support for law enforcement, but increasing their pay and bolstering up law enforcement agencies across the state of North Carolina. On the other side, Governor Stein talked about the impacts of opioids, as that has had a massive impact across the state of North Carolina, as well as being bipartisan in working through some of the issues that he talked about, whether it be Hurricane Helene recovery, providing and making sure that the state has an educated and competent workforce, that needs to be done in a bipartisan manner. We'll have those clips from Josh Stein coming up here in just a few minutes. It's now 5:45, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time to get another look at traffic on your Thursday morning, an update on the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Thank you, Nick.
Good morning again. It's 5:52. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Don't forget that you can watch the show live, especially a morning like today, with lots of audio and video clips over on our Carolina Journal YouTube channel. And you can take the show with you on demand by checking out our podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap the subscribe or follow button, and you'll get a new show delivered to your smartphone or tablet each and every weekday morning. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. Full analysis and coverage of last night's State of the State address from Democrat Governor Josh Stein. He was transitioning into public safety, and that, of course, brings up a huge issue that North Carolina has been facing for well over a decade now, the rise of opioids and fentanyl on our streets. The governor commented on that.
And let's improve public safety by tackling the scourges of opioid and fentanyl addiction. I first met Debbie Dalton after she experienced one of the most terrible tragedies that a parent can face. Her son, Hunter, was one of those larger-than-life personalities who made every person he met feel special. He loved golf and travel, and he beat Steph Curry in a free throw shooting competition at Davidson Basketball College. 3 days ago, Hunter should have turned 32, but at 23 years old, fentanyl tragically ended his life. There are thousands and thousands of stories like Hunter's, young people whose lives were taken too soon because of one of the deadliest drugs to ever poison this country. And too many North Carolinians are like Debbie, parents, siblings, children, friends, people who will never get their loved one back. During my time as Attorney General, we made real progress combating the fentanyl crisis on a bipartisan basis, and we helped to reduce overdose deaths in the last couple of years. But even one death to fentanyl is one death too many. That's why I'm calling on the General Assembly to fund a fentanyl control unit of law enforcement and prosecutors dedicated to getting it off our streets.
And to accomplish many of the things that Josh Stein talked about last night, of whether it's hurricane relief, keeping children in schools safe, well, he believes that needs to be done in a bipartisan manner here in North Carolina.
What we've been talking about tonight, they're not red issues or blue issues. They are North Carolina issues. Of course, on some of them, we may differ about how best to get where we want to go. That's fine. That is the democratic process. But I am certain that if we come together across our differences, we can find common ground and make progress. If those of us who believe in the possibility of bipartisanship look to Washington, D.C., we will surely become discouraged. But we do not need to be pulled into those political games. We can create something better, something forward-looking right here in North Carolina, and we can do it together.
A little shot at Washington, D.C. and some of the lack of bipartisanship that's going on there. The governor gave an example of some successful bipartisanship over the last couple of years, that Medicaid expansion, something that Democrats had as a major wish list item for quite some time. Republicans fought against for over a decade, and it was, in fact, brought forward by the Republican-led North Carolina General Assembly. Here's Governor Stein.
2 years ago, Republicans and Democrats worked together to expand Medicaid here in North Carolina. Today, more than 640,000 of our neighbors have access to newfound high-quality health care. In our struggling rural hospitals, they have been given a lifeline. But we know that some in Washington are poised to take aim at our effective, efficient, and critical Medicaid program. The cuts that Congress is considering would be absolutely devastating to the health of our people and our entire healthcare system. I have been urging Washington to follow our example by putting party aside and people first.
Overall, and recapping Governor Josh Stein's comments from last night, overall a very positive message for the most part, getting into the political weeds a little bit here and there, not necessarily surprising. But one of the big takeaways, of course, is that there is a lot that is going to need to happen in North Carolina as the General Assembly continues through their busy legislative long session. Hurricane Helene recovery, increased teacher pay, funding for schools, a lot of big ticket issues that Republicans and Democrats in Raleigh will face over the coming weeks and months. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We are back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.